Welcome to the Upside Down Simpsons. Oops, let me just change the camera angle. There we go. In today's video, I'm going to create 10 of my favorite Simpsons characters, but with a Stranger Things vibe. Once they are complete, I'm going to attach them to some button pins, and if you love them as much as I do, I will tell you how you can get one of these handmade beauts at the end of the video. So, as always, I start with a sketch. I figure that since I'm going to be making these creepy Simpsons characters small and flattish, I should be able to make quite a number in the same time that it would take me to create one big 3D figure. As I find out, I was terribly wrong. As you'll see later, each one of these pins takes me at least 3 hours in its entirety. No! Picking just 10 characters was a tricky decision. I grew up watching The Simpsons, prior to the internet being a common thing. My brothers and I would record episodes on VHS and then watch them over and over again. So for my creations, I figured I obviously needed the immediate family, Bart, Lisa, Maggie, Marge, and Homer. Then I chose Moe, Krusty, Milhouse, Mr. Burns, and Chief Wiggum. There are so many other cool characters, but I had to start somewhere. Once my sketches are complete, I have the idea of cutting them out and putting them in this old Music World bag that I found lying around, so I can randomly select each one as sort of a surprise. Yeah, not exactly the most creative, but I figured I wouldn't be able to pick and choose the order this way, as I may have been more partial towards some than others. I have a button maker that I bought from Amazon to make my own buttons. I sell them at an antique market, but I have never made 3D ones before. I decide the best way to start is to create a textured base for each one. Using my pasta maker, I flatten out a piece of Super Sculpey firm clay. Then, using the top plate of the button, I press it down into the clay to make a perfect circle. I of course repeat this process 10 more times. Once this is done, I find a variety of different textures around my house to use, like this piece of mesh that I had laying around. I press each strand in firmly to really make the pattern pronounced. I then pick lots of other things like this old business card holder that I used in another video, as well as my water pick tool attachments. The brushes make interesting patterns, some looking more like concrete, some like scales, and some I just scratch, poke, and prod. I'm not too worried about how these look because I know that the head of the character is going to cover up most of it anyway, and I'm going to be painting it as well. Once all 10 have been properly attacked, I stick them in my oven so that I can work on them without destroying the texture. On to the button making process. Here's my button maker from above. It cost me about $200, and that included 1,000 button parts. If I can find it, I will add it to the link in the description. As I said earlier, I sell buttons at an antique market, but those have paper and a piece of plastic that forms the complete button. In this case, I'm only going to be creating the shell, since I will be super gluing the finished sculpt to the metal plate at the end. As a result, the button press didn't exactly work right, and for every one that worked, I got a dud. So I dig my hand into that vintage bag, and who would emerge first? None other than Bartman himself. Since this is different than the other button pins that I've made before, this required some trial and error. I figured the best method was to just shape the clay with my drawing so that I would have an accurate size. I quickly realized that this is not going to work, so I cut him out and press him on top of a flat piece of clay before slicing around him. Now I get to work shaping his skull so that it adheres to the hardened base. I roll balls for eyes and flatten them slightly. A blob gets added for his nose as well as a long ropey bit for his mouth. At this point I decide to move on to the next character, but I will tell you that I add a little depth to him off camera later on. Next up, the infamous Chief Wiggum. Man, I love this cop.
Bake him away, toys.
What'd you say, Chief?
I sure will bake you away, but not until you're finished. Just like Bart, I cut around my drawing before pressing it into the clay. My tooth scraping tool is perfect for creating a little template, so I can build up his face into a 3D blob of goodness. I add bits and pieces to build up his hat, his eyes, his nose, and upper lip. I then use another water pick tool to texturize his hair and accentuate some of his flubber. On to Maggie. I cut, press, then poke a design into the clay. I build up her eyes, nose, cheeks, and pacifier. Oh, and I can't forget her little bow. So many of these characters have small elements that help define them. I use the end of my pick to poke some pupils into those good old eyeballs, and it's on to my main man, Homer. There are so many classic moments that Homer has had over the years. He's just such a classic character. I follow the same process, which includes cutting out the template, pressing it firmly into my flattened piece of clay, etching the design and then building up his face. The reason Homer and all the other characters look normal at this point is because I want them recognizable before painting them in weird and bizarre ways. Here's Homer now that his brow and mouth region have been built up. It is at this point I figure my explanations are getting a little repetitive, so I take a page out of Henry Ford's book and start an assembly line. I line up each picture with one of my base plates, I cut out all the drawings, press them, cut them out of the clay, and then do my etching on each slab. I get to work on Mr. Burns first, followed by Krusty, then of course Marge, Moe, Lisa, and finally Milhouse. Although these are small, it is incredibly time-consuming trying to make each figure look right. Lisa took me forever, but that might have been because I was working on her at like 2 a.m. Now that all my clay designs are complete, I take some rubbing alcohol and give them a quick painting to remove all the turds and crumbs left over. Then it's into the oven at 275 degrees for 20 minutes. Alright, they're done. And with a quick spin of this tray, I prime them all in white so they're ready for their real paint jobs. Bart gets a purpley pink skin color that resembles a bloody piece of meat. I give him some crazy bloodshot eyes and a variety of washes to make him kind of grungy. Next I paint Milhouse to look like a frog that was kicked out of clown school. On to Chief Wiggum. You'll notice that with each character I use yellow in the background to kind of remind you of their original colors and how they are now freaks from the upside down. Chief Wiggum gets some swampy green skin with white spots and grayish black hair. A quick swing of my hands presents Marge, a creepy blue-green minion who looks like she's straight out of a cheesy horror movie. I really like the way her bulbous hair turned out. And finally, to make a long story short, the remaining 5 pins. Painted and looking pretty. The only thing left to do now is to hot glue gun them onto the metal buttons so they're ready to be worn. I was going to ask my wife which one her favorite one was, but...
They're all great.
Okay, wait.
I think I like the Bart one best.
I was gonna ask you that on camera.
I'm curious to know which one you like best and would appreciate if you'd comment down below. Now, as I mentioned before, if you are interested in owning one of these handmade Simpsons buttons, head on over to my Patreon page, linked below. I greatly appreciate any donations to keep these videos coming. At my highest tier, you will receive a handmade button. The first 10 people will receive one of these Simpsons ones. I will be sending them out to you directly in the mail 4 times a year, right to your doorstep. And perhaps other things as time goes on. Thanks to all my Patreons that I currently have, and a special thanks to Don who has been with me since the start. See you in the next video. New videos every Friday.
Dear Lord, that's the loudest profanity I've ever heard.